I still remember the way my son looked at me that afternoon. Not angry, not sad, not even worried, just annoyed. I was a bill he didn't want to pay. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a folder from the cardiologist in front of me. My hands were folded on top of it because if I didn't keep them still, they would shake. A week earlier, I had been told my heart was weaker than it should have been. The doctor had used careful words, serious condition, further treatment, possible procedure, time-sensitive decisions. But all I heard was one thing: I might not have as much time as I thought. So I called my son, Daniel. He was my only child. My husband had died 12 years earlier. And after that, Daniel became the center of what was left of my family. I babysat his children. I helped him with down payments. I paid for braces, summer camps, emergency car repairs, and more dinners than I could count. I never kept score. That is what mothers do, right? We give, and then one day we realize everyone has mistaken our love for an unlimited bank account. Daniel came over that day with his wife, Megan. She walked in behind him, wearing sunglasses on top of her head and looking around my house like she was already deciding what furniture she wanted. I made coffee. Though I was too nervous to drink any, Daniel didn't sit down right away. He stood by the counter, scrolling through his phone. "So," he said, without looking up, "what exactly did the doctor say?" I opened the folder and tried to explain. The tests, the medication, the possibility of surgery if things got worse, the cost. That was the word that finally made him look up. Cost. I nodded. "My insurance will cover some of it." I said, "But not everything." Megan leaned back in her chair and gave Daniel a look I recognized. It was the same look she gave him whenever I asked to see the grandchildren on a weekend they already had plans. Daniel sighed. "Mom," he said, "I don't want to sound harsh." And the moment he said that, I knew something harsh was coming. "You're 72, he continued. "At some point, you have to be realistic." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "Like we were discussing a broken washing machine. It means maybe spending all that money on treatment doesn't make sense." The room went quiet. Even the old refrigerator seemed to stop humming. I looked at my son, the boy I had stayed up with when he had asthma attacks, the boy I had driven across town at midnight because he forgot a school project, Tony Cest, the man whose mortgage I had helped save when he lost his job 8 years earlier. And I asked softly, "Are you saying I'm not worth treating?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I'm saying you're too old to waste money on." There it was. 7 words. Clear. Clean. Cruel. Megan didn't correct him. She didn't gasp. She didn't even look uncomfortable. She just reached for her coffee and took a small sip. I waited for Daniel to take it back. He didn't. Instead, he said, "You should think about quality of life. And honestly, Mom, you've lived a full life, as if that made it easier to discard me." I wanted to cry, but something inside me went very still. There are moments in life when pain is too big to react to. It doesn't come out as tears or shouting. It just settles over you like cold dust. I closed the folder. You're right, I said. Daniel blinked. I am? I nodded. I do need to be realistic. He looked relieved. Megan looked satisfied. They stayed another 20 minutes, but after that, I barely heard them. Megan talked about property values in my neighborhood. Daniel mentioned how expensive college was getting for the twins. His twins, my grandchildren, before they left, Daniel kissed the top of my head like he had done his duty. Think about what we said. Okay? I smiled. I will. And I did. I thought about it all night. I thought about it while washing the 2 coffee mugs they had used. I thought about it while looking at the framed photos on my mantle. Daniel at 6. Missing both front teeth. Daniel at graduation. Daniel holding his newborn twins while I stood beside him. Exhausted but happy. After spending 3 days cleaning his house so Megan could rest. Then I looked at a photo of my late husband, Robert. He was smiling in that picture. He always had kind eyes. What would you do? I whispered. Of course. He didn't answer. But I remembered something he had said years ago when Daniel first started asking for money after college. Love him. Robert told me, but don't let love make you blind. I had been blind for a long time. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name was Mr. Harris, and he had handled Robert's estate when he passed, and he was older now, slower, but his voice was still steady. Eleanor, he said, it's been a while. Yes, I said, I need to change my will. There was a pause. Is everything all right? I looked at the folder from the cardiologist sitting on my table. No, I said, but I'm finally seeing clearly. 2 days later, he sat in Mr. Harris's office. It smelled like paper, leather chairs, and old coffee. He had my current will in front of him. The one that left almost everything to Daniel, the house, the savings, Robert's watch collection, my jewelry, even the small lake cabin that had been in my family for 40 years. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses. You understand this is a significant change. I do. You want to remove Daniel as the primary beneficiary? Yes. And leave the majority of your estate to, he looked down at the notes, the Miller Heart Foundation, St. Anne's Community Clinic, and a college trust for your grandchildren, controlled by an independent trustee. That's right. And Daniel, I took a breath. He can have Robert's old fishing rod. Mr. Harris looked up for the first time that day. He almost smiled. Anything else? Yes. I said, a letter, to be read when the will is read. He nodded. Would you like to dictate it? I folded my hands in my lap. No, I need to write that myself. Changing the will should have felt dramatic. It didn't. It felt quiet, like closing a door gently. After realizing the people inside had stopped caring whether you were there, I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell Megan. I didn't even confront them. That was the part they never expected. People like Daniel and Megan expect anger. They expect tears. They expect begging, because as long as you are emotional, they still feel powerful. Silence scares them more. Over the next few weeks, I started making changes, small ones at first. I stopped automatically offering help. When Megan texted, "Can you watch the kids Saturday? We have a dinner," I replied, "I'm not available." She didn't answer for 3 hours. Then she wrote, "Since when?" I stared at the message for a while. Then I put the phone down. I also stopped sending checks, not in a cruel way, not with a speech. I just stopped. Daniel called the first time his credit card payment bounced because he had expected me to cover part of it like usual. "Mom, did you forget?" "No." I said, "There was a pause. You didn't send the transfer." "I know." "Another pause? Is there a reason?" "Yes." He waited. I didn't continue. Finally, he laughed. "But it sounded forced." "Okay. Are you mad about the doctor conversation?" "No." "Danielle, then what is this?" This is me being realistic. He didn't like that. I could hear it in the way his breathing changed. "Mom, don't be dramatic." "I'm not. You know things are tight right now. They're tight for me too. But you have savings." "I do." He waited again. I said nothing. That was when he began to understand that something had shifted. Not everything, not yet, but enough. At the same time, I started spending more time with people who made me feel alive. There was Mrs. Alvarez from next door, who brought me soup after my first round of new medication made me dizzy. She didn't ask what my house was worth. She didn't ask whether I had updated my insurance. She just stood there holding a pot of chicken soup and said, "You are not going through this alone." There was Carol, my friend from church, who drove me to appointments when Daniel said he had meetings. There was my grandson, Noah. He was 16, quiet, and nothing like his parents. He called me one evening after Megan had told me the twins were too busy to visit. "Grandma," he whispered, "Mom said you're sick. I'm getting treatment." "Sweetheart, are you scared?" I looked out the window at the maple tree Robert had planted 30 years earlier. "Yes," I said, "a little. I can come over after school tomorrow." "You don't have to." "I want to." And he did. Noah came over twice a week after that. He helped carry groceries. He learned how to make Robert's old beef stew recipe. Sometimes he sat at my kitchen table doing homework while I rested on the couch. He never asked for anything. Not once. One afternoon, I woke from a nap and found him quietly replacing the batteries in my smoke detectors. I stood in the hallway and watched him. He turned and smiled. "Dad never remembers this stuff," he said. My throat tightened. "No," I said, "he doesn't." Noah didn't know about the will. He didn't know I had set aside money for him and his sister. He didn't need to. Love that is real doesn't need to know what it will inherit. Daniel, however, began noticing more. The calls became more frequent. At first, he pretended they were about my health. "How are you feeling?" "Mom, fine today." "Good, good." Then came the real question. So, have you thought any more about the house? The house? Yeah. It's a lot for you to manage. Megan and I were thinking maybe it's time to put it in my name now, just to make things easier. I almost laughed. Easier for whom? For everyone. Everyone? He sighed. Mom, don't twist my words. I'm not twisting them. I'm listening to them. He went quiet. Then his voice softened. That was always his second strategy. Look, I'm worried about you. If something happens, paperwork could get complicated. I have a lawyer. I know, but family should handle family matters. Family should do many things. Danielle, he didn't respond. I could feel him searching for the right tone. The loving son, the responsible adult, the tired father, the victim, he had used all of them before. Are you punishing me? He asked. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. That was the first time I heard him truly lose patience. From me, I closed my eyes. Yes. He hung up. For 3 weeks, I didn't hear from him. Megan posted photos online during that time. Beach trips, restaurants, a new patio set. Then, one Friday evening, Daniel called. His voice was cheerful, too cheerful. Mom, we want you to come to dinner Sunday. I sat in my armchair with a blanket over my legs. Dinner? Yeah. Just family. We haven't seen you in a while. I looked at the calendar. My follow-up appointment was Monday morning. Daniel knew that I had told him twice. What's the occasion? No occasion. Can't a son invite his mother to dinner? He could. But this son usually didn't. Still, I went not because I believed him, because by then I had learned that when people show you who they are, sometimes you need to let them finish the performance. Their house was bright and perfect. The kind of place Megan liked to photograph but not clean herself. The twins were there. Noah hugged me tightly. His sister, Lily, smiled, but she seemed nervous. Megan's parents were there too, along with Daniel's boss and his wife. That surprised me. It wasn't family dinner. It was an audience. Megan served roast chicken and spent most of the meal talking about how stressful life had been. Between work, the kids, and worrying about Eleanor, she said, touching her chest. It's been a lot. I looked at her. She had not called me once after my diagnosis. Daniel nodded solemnly. We've been trying to convince Mom to make practical decisions. Everyone looked at me. There it was. The stage, the setup. I set my fork down. Megan's father cleared his throat. Well, at a certain age, planning is important. Daniel leaned forward. Exactly. Which is why I think it's time we all talk honestly. Noah looked confused. About what? Daniel ignored him. Mom's health is uncertain. The house is too much for her. The lake cabin is sitting empty. And she's been making emotional choices lately. I felt the room tilt, but I kept my face calm. Megan reached over and placed a folder on the table. I recognized the type immediately. Legal forms. We spoke to someone, she said, just to understand options. I looked at my son. You brought me here to pressure me into signing paperwork? Daniel's face reddened. No, we brought you here because we love you. No, I said softly. You brought witnesses. The room went silent. Megan smiled in that tight way of hers. Eleanor, no one is attacking you. Then what are these forms? She opened her mouth. But Daniel answered, power of attorney, property transfer documents, basic planning. I repeated. Noah pushed back from the table. Dad, what is this? Daniel snapped. This is adult business. And that was when I saw Noah's face change. Not anger, disappointment. The kind that doesn't go away. I stood slowly. My heart was beating too fast. But my voice stayed calm. I won't be signing anything tonight. Daniel stood too. Mom, sit down. I looked at him. For a second, he seemed like a stranger. No, you're being irrational. No, Daniel, I was irrational for years. Tonight, I'm finished. I picked up my purse. Megan whispered, This is embarrassing. I turned to her. Yes. I said, It is. Then I walked out. Noah followed me to the porch. Grandma, I'm sorry. I touched his cheek. You have nothing to be sorry for. I didn't know. I know. His eyes filled with tears. I can drive you home. You're 16. I have my license. I smiled for the first time that night. Then I accept. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Noah said, Dad told us you were confused. I looked out at the dark road. I'm not confused. I know. That was all he said. But it meant everything. After that dinner, Daniel stopped pretending. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls. Then came the messages. You humiliated me. You made Megan cry. You are letting strangers influence you. You need to think about your grandchildren. That last one almost worked. It always had before, but then I remembered Noah's face at that table. My grandchildren didn't need me to surrender everything to their parents. They needed me to protect what I could. So I called Mr. Harris again. I want to make sure everything is airtight. I said, It is, he replied. And the trustee for the grandchildren? Confirmed. Daniel can't touch it? No. Megan? No. I exhaled. Good. My health went up and down after that. Some days were almost normal. I watered my plants. I baked banana bread. I sat with Carol on the porch and complained about squirrels. Other days, walking from the bedroom to the kitchen felt like crossing a mountain. Daniel didn't visit. Megan didn't either. But Noah did. And sometimes Lily came with him. At first, she was quiet. She had always been closer to Megan, more polished, more careful. But one afternoon, she helped me sort old photo albums and found a picture of Daniel as a baby. You look so happy here, she said. I was. Were you happy being a mom? I smiled. Very. Even when Dad was difficult, I laughed softly. Especially then. Difficult children still need love. She looked down. Does difficult mean bad? No. Sweetheart. Then what does bad mean? I thought for a moment. Bad is when someone knows they are hurting you and keeps doing it because it benefits them. She didn't say anything after that, but she kept the photo. Months passed. I kept my appointments. I took my medication. I followed the diet that tasted like cardboard and sadness. I did everything I could to stay here as long as possible. Not for Daniel, not anymore. For myself, for Noah and Lily, for mornings with sunlight on the kitchen floor, for Robert's tree outside the window, for the small, ordinary moments I had almost forgotten to value. Then came Thanksgiving. Daniel called 2 days before. I almost didn't answer. "Mom," he said, and his voice was warm again. "We'd like you to come for dinner." I closed my eyes. "Why?" he sighed. "Because you're my mother." That didn't matter much last time. There was a pause. I handled that badly. It was not an apology. It was an observation. Still, I listened. "I've been under pressure," he continued. "Work, bills, college coming up." I said things I shouldn't have. I waited. He didn't say the 7 words. He didn't say, "I'm sorry I told you that you were too old to waste money on." He didn't say, "I'm sorry I tried to take your home." He said, "Let's move on." People who hurt you often love that phrase, "move on." It means they are tired of hearing about the wound they made. I said, "I already have plans." "With who?" "Carol and Mrs. Alvarez." "Neighbors? Friends?" He scoffed before he could stop himself. "You're choosing neighbors over family?" I looked around my quiet kitchen. The same kitchen where I had packed lunches for him. The same kitchen where he had told me I was not worth saving. "No," I said, "I'm choosing people who chose me." I hung up first. That Thanksgiving was one of the best I ever had. Not fancy, not perfect. Carol brought sweet potatoes. Mrs. Alvarez made turkey with too much garlic, and we all pretended it wasn't too much because it was delicious anyway. Noah and Lily came by later with pie. They said they had bought themselves. We played cards. We laughed. At one point, I looked around the table and realized something that nearly broke me open. Family is not always the people who expect your sacrifice. Sometimes family is the people who notice when your hands are cold and bring you a sweater without being asked. My condition remained stable for almost 2 years. Long enough for Noah to graduate high school. Long enough for Lily to start questioning her parents more. Long enough for Daniel to become increasingly frustrated that I had not faded quietly into the background. He tried several more times. A birthday card with a long note about forgiveness. A Christmas visit where Megan admired my dining room cabinet 3 times. A phone call where he said, "I hope you know I only ever wanted what was best for you." I wanted to believe him. That was the hardest part. No matter how much someone hurts you, love does not disappear on command. Some nights, I still cried for the son I remembered. The little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who cried when Robert got sick. The young man who once told me, "Mom, I don't know what I'd do without you." I missed that version of Daniel, but I had to accept that the man he became had looked at my illness and seen opportunity. And once you accept the truth, You can't unknow it. Eventually, my heart began to fail more quickly. There was no dramatic hospital scene, no sudden collapse, just more appointments, more fatigue, more quiet conversations with doctors who chose their words carefully. I think everyone knew, Noah came home from college one weekend and found me sitting on the porch, wrapped in Robert's old cardigan. He sat beside me. "I'm scared," he said. I took his hand. "Me too. I don't want you to go." "I don't want to go either," he cried then. So did I. But it was not the same kind of crying I had done after Daniel's words. This grief was clean, painful, but honest. Before Noah left that weekend, I gave him a small wooden box. "What is it?" he asked. "Letters? For you and Lily. Some for later." "Later when?" "You'll know." He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. I didn't mind. Daniel visited 3 weeks before I died. He came alone. That surprised me. He looked older, tired, less polished. For a moment, I saw my child again. He stood in my living room, looking around like he had not really seen it in years. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I nodded. He sat across from me. "I know things have been bad." "Yes, I know I said some things." I waited. He swallowed. I was scared. That made me look at him. Scared? Of losing you? Of the bills? Of everything changing? I wanted to ask how fear had turned into cruelty. How fear had put legal papers on a dinner table. How fear had sounded exactly like greed. But I was tired. Too tired to pull truth out of someone who still wanted to hide from it. I was scared too. I said. He looked down. "I need to know something." There it was. I felt it before he said it. "About the will." The room went very still. "What about it? Did you change it?" I looked at my son for a long time, then I smiled sadly. "You came to ask me that now?" His face flushed. "No. I mean, I just need to make sure everything is settled." "It is. But did you change it?" I thought of the day at the kitchen table. Too old to waste money on. I thought of the dinner with the legal forms. I thought of Noah replacing my smoke detector. I thought of Mrs. Alvarez bringing soup. I thought of Carol holding my hand during appointments. And I said, "Yes." Daniel stared at me. "What?" "Yes." "Daniel, I changed it." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "When?" "After you told me I was too old to waste money on." He stood up. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that." I laughed once, not because it was funny, because after all that time, those were the words he chose. "You meant it exactly like that?" "No." I was stressed. You were honest. He paced to the window. "What did you do?" "I made sure the people who cared for me would be honored. I made sure Noah and Lily would be protected. And I made sure my money would help people who are still fighting to live." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means you will find out from Mr. Harris." "Mom, this is insane." "No," I said. "This is realistic." He turned sharply. I saw the moment he recognized his own word, his own cruelty, returned without anger and just truth. "Please," he said. And that was the first time he sounded like a child. Not because he missed me, because he had lost something. I wish I could say it felt satisfying. It didn't. It felt sad, deeply, terribly sad. "You still have time." I told him. His face changed. "To fix the will, to fix yourself." He left without saying goodbye. I died 19 days later. Peacefully. I was told, though of course, I only know what others later repeated. Carol was there. Mrs. Alvarez was there. Noah and Lily were there. Daniel arrived late. That became part of the story too, though I am not the one who saw it. The will was read 2 weeks after the funeral in Mr. Harris's office. Daniel came in wearing a dark suit and a face full of expectation. Megan sat beside him, gripping her purse. Noah and Lily sat across from them. Carol was there. So was Mrs. Alvarez. Daniel looked annoyed when he saw them. "What are they doing here?" he asked. Mr. Harris looked over his glasses. "They were invited." Megan whispered something under her breath. Mr. Harris began. "The lake cabin went to the Miller Heart Foundation to be used as a retreat for recovering patients and families. My savings were divided between St. Anne's Community Clinic and a medical assistance fund for elderly patients who could not afford treatment. A trust had been established for Noah and Lily's education and future needs, managed independently until they turned 30. Carol received my mother's pearl necklace. Mrs. Alvarez received my kitchen table, because she once told me every good home begins at the table. Noah received Robert's watch. Lily received my wedding ring. When she was old enough to understand what love should and should not be. And Daniel received Robert's fishing rod. Nothing more. Megan gasped. Daniel stood up so quickly, his chair scraped the floor. This can't be right. Mr. Harris remained calm. It is. She was confused. She was evaluated and fully competent. She was manipulated. No. Daniel pointed toward Carol. By them? Carol's eyes filled with tears. But she did not respond. Mrs. Alvarez did. She was loved by us. She said, that is not manipulation. Daniel looked at Noah. You knew about this? Noah shook his head. No. Did you talk her into it? No. Megan turned to Lily. Say something. Lily stared at her hands. Then she said quietly, Grandma left things to the people who showed up. No one spoke after that. Mr. Harris opened an envelope. There is also a letter from Eleanor. Daniel slowly sat down. Mr. Harris read it aloud. My dear Daniel, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. I imagine you are angry, maybe hurt, maybe shocked. You may believe this decision was made out of bitterness. It was not. It was made out of clarity. For many years, I gave you everything I could. I gave you time, money, et patience, forgiveness, and chances I gave because I loved you. But love should not require a person to disappear. When I became ill, I needed my son, not my banker. not my heir, my son. Instead, you looked at me and measured my life against money. You told me I was too old to waste money on. I want you to understand something. Those words did not make me stop loving you. They made me start loving myself. I changed my will because I wanted what Robert and I built to become something meaningful, something that would help people who still believed an older life was worth saving. I left protection for Noah and Lily because they showed me kindness without expectation. And I left you the fishing rod because your father once said fishing teaches patience, humility, and silence. I hope one day you learn all three. I do not want revenge for you. Daniel, I want growth. That is the last gift I can give you. Mom, by the time Mr. Harris finished, no one moved. Daniel's face had gone pale. Megan was crying, but not softly. Angry crying, embarrassed crying. Noah covered his mouth with his hand. Lily wiped her eyes. Carol bowed her head, and Daniel stared at the floor. The karma was not loud. No police came. No one screamed. No dramatic punishment fell from the sky. It was quieter than that. He had lost the house. He had lost the money. But more than anything, he had lost the version of himself that could pretend he had been a good son. That is the kind of consequence people fear most. The kind no lawyer can appeal. Months later, Noah visited the lake cabin before it was transferred to the foundation. He brought Lily with him. They walked through the small rooms, touched the old curtains, opened the windows, and found the marks on the doorframe where Robert had measured Daniel's height as a boy. Near the fireplace, Noah found a note taped under the mantle. It was in my handwriting. For whoever needs this place next, rest. Heal. You are not too old. You are not too sick. You are not too much. You are worth saving. Lily cried when she read it. Noah took a photo of the note before leaving it exactly where it was. The foundation kept it there. Years later, families would stay in that cabin while someone they loved recovered from surgery or treatment. Wives, husbands, grandparents, people with tired eyes and hopeful hearts. Some would read the note, some would cry, some would simply sit by the lake and breathe for the first time in weeks. And maybe that was the best ending I could have chosen. Not revenge, not punishment. A place where people could feel what I had needed to feel in my own kitchen that day. That their life still mattered. That love should never come with a price tag. That age does not make a person disposable. And Daniel did change after that. According to Noah, not overnight. People rarely do. At first, he was angry, then defensive, and then quiet. He and Megan fought often. The kind of fights that happen when two people lose the reward they thought cruelty would bring them. But one day, almost a year after the will was read, Daniel went to the lake cabin. He stood outside for a long time before going in. Noah was with him. Daniel read the note under the mantle. Then he sat down at the old kitchen table, the one the foundation had decided to keep after Mrs. Alvarez donated it back. And for the first time in years, my son cried without trying to make anyone feel sorry for him. I thought she'd always forgive me, he said. Noah didn't answer because some lessons do not need a response. They just need to land. Daniel never got the house. He never got the savings. He never got the easy inheritance he had counted on. But I hope he got something better. The truth that a mother's love can be endless, but her access does not have to be, that forgiveness is not the same as permission, that the people we take for granted are not furniture in the background of our lives. They are human beings. And one day, their chair will be empty. When that day comes, all the money in the world cannot buy back the chance to sit beside them and say, I'm sorry. So yes, I changed my will without saying a word. Not because I stopped being his mother, but because at the end of my life, I finally remembered I was still someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone's grandmother, someone's wife, and most importantly, I was still myself. I was not too old to matter. I was not too sick to love, and I was never, ever a waste of money.